and opportunities to take action. For nearly 2 decades, Citizens for Health has been a nonprofit pioneer in the natural health freedom movement. The Citizens for Health Education Foundation offers tools to inform the public of health issues and educate and influence policymakers. Jim Turner is here to spread the word about some of the most interesting topics that can affect your world, from the dangers of mislabeled or dangerous products to the questions and concerns of vaccines. You'll want to listen to Jim as he speaks on behalf of Citizens for Health. And now, on to our show with Jim Turner and Peter Mingils. Take it away, Peter.
All right, we're back. I did that just for
I didn't mean to go on so much like that, but I didn't realize it was taking up that much time.
No, I want to keep. What I want to do, just so you know, what I want to do is I want to be able to chop it in 30 minutes, put up 2 of them, because this is such great information. If it's an hour long, some of the platforms won't play it. If it's 30 minutes, they will. So I'm just going to take one really great radio show and split it into 2.
All right,
that's what we're doing.
We're at 12:28 right now, and I can tie it up for 12:28, and then we can go on. But I just say, the audience.
We'll do the rest. We'll do the rest in the editing.
The audience that's listening to this program, I will venture to say, has a strong part of Biden folks and a strong part of Trump folks. I mean, that would be natural. That's certainly the way it looks when we get our responses. And what's fascinating is the number of Democrats that we've heard who said they're going to vote for Trump first time they've ever voted for a Republican. It looks like most of the new voters voted for Trump. Most of the new voters voted for Trump. On the other hand, the pundits keep saying Trump got a huge boost from the Hispanics, a huge boost from the blacks, and so forth. The fact of the matter is he barely matched George W. Bush's vote, and there does not look to be any kind of Hispanic or black movement toward the Republican Party. It looks to be pretty much what's been there all along. It's really important to understand that Herbert Hoover got more black votes than Al Smith in 1928, and that ultimately that black vote ended up being part of the New Deal, and how the people handle the tactics of politics going forward from now out is going to be very interesting, with a limited presidency, a cutback Democratic majority in the House, and a Senate majority that is going to be very, very razor thin one way or the other. So we have an interesting situation, and I noticed over at the Supreme Court, it was fascinating that there was the first case that the new Supreme Court justice listened to, and she was listening to this case, and it was on the Affordable Care Act. And the Trump side's argument is that the mandate is unconstitutional, and therefore the whole act should be made unconstitutional. Now, my own position and Citizens for Health position has been all along that the mandate is unconstitutional. We said that at the time the act was passed. We felt strongly that it was unconstitutional. Ultimately, the Congress reduced the way it was is you had to buy insurance or you would be fined. Well, we said that was unconstitutional. We also said the fine was so small, it was like 1/10 of what you would have to pay for insurance, that anybody who was making a calculated decision would pay the fine rather than buy the insurance. So therefore, it was impractical. And then ultimately, Congress actually reduced the fine to 0. So you have a mandate, you must buy the insurance, but if you don't, nobody cares. You don't get a fine, you don't get arrested, nothing bad happens to you, that's just the way it is. And so the Trump side of the argument says, therefore, since the mandate's unconstitutional, the whole law should be unconstitutional. Over at the Supreme Court, the conservative justices are asking the Trump lawyers, because the government came in on the side of the law is unconstitutional, asking the Trump lawyers, why is it if we declare the mandate unconstitutional, we're required to declare the entire act unconstitutional? My belief is, from a legal point of view, the mandate is unconstitutional, but the entire act is not unconstitutional just because the mandate is unconstitutional. And I suspect there's a good chance that's where the case will come out, although I can't say that for sure. And I also need to point out that many states have gone gone and created their own Affordable Care Acts on a statewide level. So, for example, California, which is, I guess, the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world, has an Affordable Care Act structure that will survive even if the federal act goes out of business. And that's true of many of the states that have adopted the Medicare portions of the Affordable Care Act. Those are mostly blue states, northern states, although some red states have done it as well. A number of red states have resisted doing it. So basically, if the law is entirely declared unconstitutional, most of the blue states will still have the Affordable Care Act working on a state level, and most of the red states that have not adopted the Affordable Care Act will not. So the people in the red states will have more expensive health care than the people in the blue states, the way it will unfold if the entire law is declared unconstitutional. If only the mandate's declared unconstitutional, then basically we bring the law into line with the reality that has been happening through the legislature. That reality in the legislature is why I suspect the law will come out saying that it is an unconstitutional mandate, but not necessarily, but not an unconstitutional law. But again, Citizens for Health has supported for years the notion of we believe strongly in health savings accounts where people get a tax deferment and they can use that money for health care. We support 26-year-olds on the children on the parents' health plans. We support discovering pre-existing condition folks and so on. And by the way, those things have 70, 80, 90% support from the public. And where our argument is that the healthcare system dominated by insurance companies, drug companies, and other concentrated economic interests are actually undermining the healthcare of the country, running the costs up enormously. The U.S. is the number one per capita cost for health country in the world. The second most costly usually is Switzerland, and it's one half that cost. Our statistics, health statistics, are atrocious. We're around 25th in the world in life expectancy. We're as high as 40th, perhaps, in some 35 to 40th, perhaps, in a maternal death, birth death. That is, the mother dies in childbirth. We're between 35 and 40th in the world on that statistic. We have, in every decade of life, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, and so forth, we are the worst industrialized country for health indicators of any of the industrialized country in each category, each decade of health. Systematically, our healthcare statistics are terrible. Our costs are enormous. So we have high costs, dangerous performance, and poor products. I am arguing, and my analysis tells me, that the wide breadth of American people, over 50%, use integrative medicine as either an adjunct or a replacement for drugs, radiation, and surgery, over 50%. My analysis is that the COVID concerned community, which is a vast amount of the public, 100% of the public's affected by COVID, and what that means in terms of illness and so forth is still an open question, but still everyone is being affected by it. I'm suggesting that percent of the people who voted as COVID being their most important issue, about 50% voted for Biden and about 50% voted for Trump. And that, I think, is going to become more and more evident as elections unfold. We are not going to see divisions strictly along so-called left-right, blue-red lines, because there's too much order freedom going on, and too many people want more choice than the Democrats are willing to allow, and too many people want better access to more things than the order Republicans are willing to allow. So given the fact that the corporations and the government make an alliance to run up healthcare costs and run down health performance, I'm not saying they do that purposely. I'm not saying they get in a room and plan to do that. I'm saying they get in a room and make choices that cause that to happen. they preempt the choice of the individual. And what I'm suggesting is that the aggregation of individual choice will give us a much better health care system, much less costly, much better outputs, much more in balance, and better health for individuals. Yeah, the broader we can make health choice in the system, the better our health statistics will become, and the more balanced our health costs will be. That's the Citizens for Health argument, and we are arguing that in the healthcare area, as in every other area where we have large concentrated industrial corporations, in every one of those areas, the consumption purpose and the consumer interest is being suppressed. Adam Smith, who is the first chronicler, if not the inventor, of free market capitalism, argued very specifically, consumption is the sole end and purpose of all production. The producer's interest ought to be attended to only insofar as it advances that of the consumer. This is in the 1780s that he wrote this. And he said the merchants and manufacturers have been the ones that have created that, the laws that undermine the consumer. That's, over 200 years ago, that was the problem, remains the problem, and it's the problem today. And now it's just wreaking huge havoc on our society, and because we are the world's leader, both economically and politically, it's wreaking it on the world. So we need to and are moving down a path where individual choice in healthcare is beginning to start to bite into the dynamic of industrial choices being made for us. We'll see what happens. We've got a constrained presidency coming along. Whether Trump or Biden ends up in the presidency, I believe it'll be Trump by 90% likelihood. I'm sorry, Biden by 90% likelihood. Biden by a 90% likelihood. I think Trump is being abandoned by many of his allies. His two law firms that have been pushing him have stepped way back. The lawyers that managed the Bush campaign activities in 2000 have all said this is the arguments that are being made legally don't work. I think 10 courts have rejected the Trump arguments so far. Now, to Trump, that's all a conspiracy. I don't know. It seems, could easily be. I mean, when the community comes to a point of view and everybody's saying the same thing, it looks like a conspiracy, but it may not be. It's possible it's not a conspiracy. Irrespective, if it is a conspiracy, the conspirators are all on the side that's winning, and Trump is not doing very well. Now, the people that are hanging on to Trump, I'm not sure what their rationale is about how to slow down the transition and so forth. That doesn't help their constituency, their 70 million. One of the most interesting arguments that I've seen coming up lately is that Trump's behavior is betraying the 70 million people that voted for him, or at least a large majority of them. But in any case, setting all that aside, we're moving in a direction where more and more choice is being made, more and more prevalent through the social media and the internet's access to information, through all the various blogs and web pages and Wikipedia and all the different things that are up there, Brett Bart and everything that's out there, left, right, middle, blue, yellow, green, orange, red, all of them are out there, and individuals are finding ways to put together their own profile and then to go out and take action based on their profile. And the argument that we make, both from Transpartisan Review and from the Citizens for Health, is that collective set of individual decision-making will actually guide us to the best outcomes. And I'm pointing at this election where highly constrained electorate, very, very limited in what choices they have, where it was able as an electorate to restrict the power of the presidency significantly, to diminish the power of the Democrats in the House and diminish the power of the Republicans in the Senate. I'm here to tell you that I don't think a political consultant sitting down and trying to design such a strategy that would come up with such a result could have done so. We've got a very fascinating situation, and now we're going to see how that translates. Now our first test is going to be this wonderful Stacey Abrams versus McConnell in Georgia, two senators up at the same time. There's forces at bay that are quite different than the ones that our pollsters and pundits try to deal with. So that's my ramble for today. I'm sorry to get on my soapbox there, and I hope people listen to it and are interested.
All great information, and you can listen to all of this stuff again if you go to buildingfortressradio.com/citizens. You can hear Jim on the previous radio shows, and now we're going to also, like I said, post it on different platforms. So, Jim, I have a philosophical dilemma, and it may be a management style. Because I was responsible for my own income running my own business when I was a distributor and eventually a branch manager and eventually area VP with Electrolux, the vacuum cleaner company, I had some pretty good training. And one of the things that I learned is if it's going to determine my level of success, I want to get personally involved. So I learned things like inspect what I expect. And, I could handle confrontations or conflicts among salespeople by getting in and finding the facts. Or if somebody says, there's something crooked going on in Flushing, I'd go into the Flushing office and I'd witness whatever was going on in Flushing and be able to fix it because I was ultimately responsible. They determined my income, whether I was going to either be promoted or demoted or not. So I was really big on getting in, finding the facts, avoiding some of the drama, understanding there's probably lots of sides of every story. So I kind of dig in a little bit, and I watched Rudy Giuliani, who I have some levels of respect for on some occasions, and not so much levels of respect for on other occasions. So on Every Day with Rudy Giuliani, he starts with a blank slate with me, and I can go either way. But I was watching him for several hours talk about affidavits about this and affidavits about that, and real evidence. And then I go on CNN and they say there's no evidence. I'm like, wait a minute. And then I hear about the Dominion software and other things like that, and tracking through public records, who owns it and where it's been used. And as I start to find out more stuff, I'll take a comment that some people are saying, like, Trump's lawsuits are being thrown out. Well, he says, well, they're not Trump's lawsuits. They're groups that are suing. They have nothing to do with Trump, and they filed their lawsuit before the election, and now the election's over. And then he would say things like, whatever he would say. And as I started to get to my managerial philosophical style and started to dig in through all the muck, I said, you know what, there's a lot of truth here. There's a lot of truth here that deserves questioning. And that I find is really frustrating because when I go to any news, it's kind of like, oh, well, they really never produced any evidence. There's no evidence. There's been zero evidence. I'm like, oh, my God, what are you talking about, zero evidence? They have 250 affidavits of sworn affidavits, perjury, if people are lying to say that they saw some chicanery going on in this section. What are you talking about, no evidence? That's a lie. That's a lie. And I'll go to, like, for instance, the lawyers that left. Let's imagine that Giuliani told the truth once, and he says the reason why they left is because their families are being threatened. Their kids are being death threatened. People are being threatened. They said that if they continue to work for Trump, their law businesses are going to be decimated, destroyed. Well, unfortunately, I know the way the world works, and there might be some truth to that. And here's my point. Such a sad situation that that's the case. You can't be a lawyer for Donald Trump or Joe Biden without having your kids threatened. That's how sad. I know that stuff has gone on for a million years, but it's highlighted today on, yesterday's 3-hour Rudy Giuliani rant. But there's some really smart people that are telling the other side of the story, and I think they need to have it heard. And I'll use a little bit of your comments a little bit later on, or a little bit earlier, where you said, by the time we're done with this, we'll probably have a better healthcare system. Well, I think by the time we're done with this, there's going to be a lot of people asking some really tough questions, and they'll be not just electoral people, they'll be ordinary citizens. And I don't know about the next election, but the next presidential election, it's going to be pretty hard to pull something, because there's going to be a lot of eyes looking on. Everybody's going to be looking, because I think everybody's a little bit suspect of the process, which is really sad in certain ways, but really good in others. So I'll let you comment on what I just said.
Well, I'm going to begin by just saying that the whole series of arguments that you just outlined were made in 2004 about the Kerry campaign having been treated exactly the way the Trump campaign is claiming that it's being treated now. And it got so far as to be in a federal court, and there was a discovery underway, and the Democratic Secretary of State of Ohio and the team that was bringing the case there found an operative who had been involved, he claimed, in having been involved in actually altering the vote in a way that would have been detrimental to Kerry in Ohio, which would have been would have been a bad thing. And he was to go do a deposition in Ohio, and Sunday night he got in his plane and started to fly to Columbus, and on the way his plane crashed. And so he was killed, and there was never any deposition, and that case kind of dissipated. Now that's a story that's out there from 2004, and there's a whole conspiracy thing built up around that, and there's a whole argument there. And you can go online if you want to look for, quote, a left conspiracy. You'll find almost identical arguments as the ones that Giuliani's making. Now, the thing that's interesting in today's world is what I believe we are in the middle of, and that is a breakout. The individual up until now, up until the last 10, 15 years, has been highly constrained about what information they could get and what information they could share. And all the kinds of things we're talking about, say the Giuliani press conference, as you have just pointed out, have been going on for years. I remember when I organized the political party at Ohio State when I was in undergraduate school, one of the things that had gone on the year before was that one party, student party, stole all the ballot boxes, and another party managed to get hold of the ballots out of the ballot boxes and burn them. That was going on. Now, this is a way that has been part of the dynamic that's been going on for years, centuries perhaps. The vote, remember, is there to substitute for guns. If you were in Elizabethan England and you wanted to express yourself politically, you either got yourself a bunch of money or found somebody with a bunch of money, and then you hired a bunch of mercenaries and you created an army, and then you marched up to the palace and tried to throw out the king or the queen. And then they would go and get their army, and they would throw them out, and they would fight. And whoever won the fight became king and became the person that ran things. The dynamic of democracy is to say, why do we have to shoot each other in order to come to a conclusion about how we're going to proceed? Why don't we just subject it to a vote? And that is how we got to voting. The fighting underneath that is the same. I mean, the same kinds of passionate, committed, argumentative positions still exist. But we don't go out and buy an army now to go have that fight. So then you go along and you find that, in 1960, the argument was that, the mafia gave Kennedy the voice in Chicago that caused him to win Illinois and win the election. Nixon's position was, all right, I agree, that's true. Then he put himself to work and came back and ran for re-election 8 years later and won and became president. Now there are arguments that there was all kinds of chicanery going on in the Nixon campaign and that he won for those reasons. And then there's, of course, Watergate, which came along, which was something that grew out of chicanery that came out of the presidential committee of Nixon. Now, what I'm saying is, here we are with Giuliani. I saw a part of that press conference. Unfortunately, the problem I've had with Trump and his team all along is they do not seem to be particularly adept at playing in the game of politics that America has. I mean, they systematically seem to step into a trap that the enemies that they have lays for them, and then they call it a conspiracy or unfair or wrong or bad. Trump had many ways of besting Biden in this election. I say the following things to folks. If Trump had argued the first debate the way he argued the second debate, and then argued the second debate the way he argued the first debate, if he'd switched them, I'd say he'd have picked up another 5 to 10 million votes. That's my guess. But he did it the opposite way, and I don't think he ever recovered from that first debate. Secondly, I tell Democrats, you should be very, 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 you should thank your lucky stars as Democrats that Trump wasn't occupying the White House as a Democrat, because he was a Democrat, and he was a non-Republican, a Democrat, independent, and so forth, up until 2010. Trump could easily, playing his cards slightly differently, have pulled off the same trick in the Democratic Party and become the Democratic nominee. It's possible. Fortunately, the way the cards plays for the Democrats, he wasn't. And what that lays out is this blue-red argument is just misleading. It's terribly misleading. What Giuliani was doing there, and Giuliani has always been. I lived in New York for a number of years. In fact, from 1958 until 1988, my in-law family lived in New York. I spent years there. I lived there 4 years myself, and I spent a lot of time watching New York. And Giuliani was not the most widely liked guy. Jimmy Breslin, who was one of the premier superstar columnists in New York, said Giuliani, while he was mayor, said Giuliani's a small man looking for a balcony. He's a strange guy. He's done a lot of things in his legal practice that have not been cheered upon. And unfortunately, he got in this situation in a place where things were just way beyond his capacity to control. Now, Trump and his team are trying to control events and say that they're going to come out on top. And, I have friends that say he is. I don't know. It looks to me like 90-10, Biden's going to be inaugurated. But, people have lost elections by a popular vote before and not been inaugurated as president. It's happened before. It happened in, I think, 1880 was when the Hayes-Tilden case occurred. And, Tilden won the election and Hayes won the presidency. In fact, if you go back to Jefferson, Aaron Burr, it's a tricky problem because it's unclear how the Adams wing of the Federalist Party ended up with as much power as it did, but they ended up controlling all the federal courts for the next 150 years.
And hold that thought for 1 second. For those people listening in, remember we said we're going to chop this off at 30 minutes, and then we're going to come back. So, Jim, we'll be back. So we are here.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Bye.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to the Citizens for Health radio show, brought to you by Citizens for Health on BuildingFortunesRadio.com with Jim Turner and Peter Mingils. Thanks for listening. For nearly 2 decades, Citizens for Health has been a nonprofit pioneer in the natural health freedom movement. Go to www.citizens.org to learn more and always listen in to Building Fortunes Radio, where our special host, Jim Turner, shares crucial information about many of the most important issues that affect your world. Citizens for Health provides over 100,000 supporters with consumer news, action alerts, and opportunities to take action. So listen in, get involved, and help spread the word. Be sure to check out the BuildingFortunesRadio.com website to hear more Citizens for Health segments with Jim Turner and Peter Mingils. And read about what's new on www.citizens.org. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. Jim Turner, Peter, and I want to say thanks for listening and ask you to go spread the word. Tell a friend, join our